Welcome to your first flight at Embry-Riddle. Today we're going to walk you through kind of what to expect on your first activity here at the university on your first flight. So we'll walk you through some of the items, flying items as well as the ground items that we'll go through today. Now, before we are allowed to depart, we first have to go through our checklist. And our checklist, the way they're written out, is we're going to actually read and do it. We'll do one item, read it, and do it, and then do another item, read it, and do it. And as you get further and further along through your course, you'll be able to do something called flows, which is doing certain checklists by memory and then verifying the items after you've done it by memory. So you're not totally doing, you'll always come back to your checklist. But for today and for the purpose of your first part of your training, your first stage, you'll be doing read and do. So the first checklist we're going to do is called the ramp out checklist. We will first turn the master switch on, right here, this red one. Both switches, the alternator side and the battery side. And we also turn the avionics bus 1 and bus 2 on. We'll wait for the avionics to start up and our screens to come on. This right here is called your PFD, and over here is your MFD. So I've got the screens turned on. What we'll do is I'll put my earpiece in so I can talk to air traffic control. And what we'll do in the first step is to first get the ATIS. Now, so to get the ATIS, like I said, we'll go over to our in-flight guide and look at the ATIS frequency 132.875, and that'll give us the conditions, the current conditions for the airfield in terms of the weather. That we're going to look for the winds, we'll look for the visibility, the cloud cover, as well as the runways in use and the altimeter setting. And we also will get notices to airmen, which will tell us anything about the airport that we should watch out for, things like taxiway closures, runway closures. So we'll put the ATIS on and we'll copy down some of the pertinent information.
Right, 2,900 feet. Read back all runway hold short instructions and runway assignments. All departures, contact clearance delivery on 119.3. Prior to taxi, advise initial contact. You have information Sierra.
Alright, information Sierra, so we'll copy that down.
Daytona Beach International Airport information Sierra 11532, observational winds 2003, visibility 7, few clouds 13,000, few clouds 25,000, temperature 242.24, altimeter 3009. Visual approach runway 16 in use. Approach is being conducted parallel or intersecting runways. Notice here minimal full crane jumps in the Daytona Beach, runway 7 left. Flash 25 right, close all associated navigate inline systems out service. Taxiway Papa 4 and taxiway Papa 5 close. Taxiway Papa between taxiway Bravo 3 and taxiway. Land and hold short operations in effect for runway 16. Available landing distance runway 16 to hold short of runway.
Alright, so now that we've gone through the entire ATIS, we want to listen to one full instruction of the ATIS, one full reception of it. And what we'll do from there was go over to clearance frequency now. Our clearance frequency, if we look at the in-flight guide here, Daytona Beach clearance delivery is 119.3. So we'll plug in 119.3 on the comm here. The big knob will change the big numbers, and the small knob on the comm button will change the numbers on the right side of the decimal. So 119.3, and what we're going to do there, we're going to go to the north practice area today. We have 3 practice areas in Daytona. We have the south practice area, the north practice area, and the DeLand practice area, which is out to the west of our field. Depending on which practice area you choose at dispatch will determine which, if you go north-south or out to the land area. Today we're going to St. Augustine, which is to the north of us. So we'll be asking for the north practice area, and we'll be asking for VFR clearance to the north practice area, and we'll request 3,000, which is the typical altitude that will happen now. ATC will come back and tell us that we can maintain probably at or below 3,000. So depending on the clouds, we'll figure out what altitude is appropriate. Right now we have clear skies, so we can assume that we should be able to go up to 3,000 feet. So I'll put on clearance. We'll listen to the frequency and make sure no one's talking and make sure no one's waiting for a response. But make sure it's clear, and now we'll talk. And our call sign today is Riddle 182.
Daytona Beach clearance, Riddle 182, north practice area, VFR 3000 with information Sierra.
Riddle 182, Daytona class, maintain VFR at or below 3000, departure frequency 125.35, squawk 0120.
Riddle 182, maintain VFR at or below 3000, departure 125.35, squawk 0120.
Riddle 182, read back is correct.
So we're going to copy down some information here. The information we're copying down is our altitude, our departure frequency, and our transponder code. The altitude being, we're going to maintain at or below 3,000. So if we have to maintain below 3,000, we can. We're going to call departure when we depart out of the airspace, when we take off. Daytona Tower will transport us over to departure. And this is the frequency we need to call them on. And our transponder code is 0120 to input that in. We'll put transponder XPDR here, push that in, push code. We'll put the 4-digit transponder code at 0120. And going back to our checklist, we'll notice that that's the ATIS clearance part. We also got an Eagle data, we got to ramp out. So on our in-flight guide, Eagle data, we say it's there, 122.825. So for 122.825. And when we ramp out, we're basically telling them that we're about to leave and there's how many people on board. Typically, if there's an instructor, you'll say dual. If you're going solo, you'll say solo.
408, can you say your hobs one more time? 408, hob 5601.9. 408, parking spot Charlie 9, activity times 2.2, secure the aircraft and welcome back. 15 ramping out, no discrepancies.
So again,
you want to watch out for, make sure no one's talking on the frequency before you talk, and motion with no one's waiting for a response. 0417 ramping out, no discrepancies. 417, attitude practice area, due back time is 10:53, have a safe flight. 452, ramping out, no discrepancies. 452, Ormond Beach, due back time is 11:20, have a safe flight. 11:20. Eagle data, Riddle 182, ramp out, no discrepancies. 182, is your instructor on board? 182, this is the instructor. 182, stand by. Eagle data, we did 424, ramp out, you'll notice capacity. 424, attitude practice area, due back 10:38. Eagle data 405, ramp out, no discrepancies. 405, Woodruff practice area, due back 10:50. Eagle data 458, ramping out, no discrepancies. 458, submarine practice area, due back 11:05. Aircraft calling that I called 182, I was limiting 1 second, stand by. 182 St. Augustine, practice area, due back time 10:50, have a safe flight. 10:50, thank you.
So we're looking for a couple bits of information there. When we ramp out, basically telling the dispatch that we are leaving. We also want to say, if you notice I said no discrepancies, and that means we look at our hobs time here. That's the time that the flight time of the aircraft kind of takes into account when the engine was started and when the engine was shut down, and that's how Embry-Riddle will obviously determine how much flight time you got today. So if that was different to what was in the clipboard, then we would ramp out with discrepancy, but as you see, there was no discrepancies today. So continuing with our checklist, it says once we've finished ramping out, avionics switch bus 1 and 2 off, and the master switch automatic off. So at this point on, we'll continue with our next checklist, which is our before start checklist. And what we'll do here, when we initiate a checklist, we will always say that which checklist we're doing. We'll say before start checklist. And beyond that, we will, once we complete the checklist, we'll say whatever the title of the checklist is, and we'll say it's complete. So before start checklist, what you'll notice here, again, it's read and we'll read and do. Passenger and crew briefing complete. So our crew briefing, what we'll do today, the passenger briefing, we had passengers, will be on the first part here. But if we normally it's just you and your instructor, you will do with the crew briefing. So the first part of the crew briefing is the airport diagram. We'll pull that up, which is on our in-flight guide, and we want to review it. We want to review where we are. So we're at the Embry-Riddle ramp. We also want to review where we're going to exit the ramp. And how to know that is that we have to look at the white lines in front of us to see the direction. And what we notice here is the direction goes out to the left, and that takes us out through Romeo 3. So we have 4 exits: Romeo 1, Romeo 2, Romeo 3, and Romeo 4. We'll go out through Romeo 3, and that point is where we'll contact ground control. This is what we call, on the Embry-Riddle ramp, a non-movement area, which means we don't have to talk to air traffic control. But across the line there, that actually will, it looks like a solid line and a dashed line. That'll denote an area that's a movement area, which means that's controlled by Daytona Beach ground control. So we'll contact them to get our taxi clearance. The runway in use is 16, so we'll figure out when we get to Romeo 3 what taxiway they want us to follow to get to 16. And we do have a hotspot at Sierra and Whiskey. Now, if I looked at my chart supplement, it says that Sierra and Whiskey aircraft that are taxiing southbound on Whiskey sometimes skip over Sierra and enter runway 7 right by mistake. So we're not going to that area, so the hotspot will not be a factor for us today, but we will just obviously you still want to brief it just to make sure that you're aware of it. And here's a hotspot at Mike 1-2. Sometimes aircraft, instead of taxiing into Papel, might enter into the ATP ramp, which is down to the south of us here. So that's the airport diagram. Going back to our briefing. ATIS, like I said, we have information Sierra, winds are 200 at 3, visibility is 7 miles. We have a few clouds at 13,000 feet, and altimeter is 3009. And what that means is that a barometric pressure right here will set to 3009 in the Colesman window, and we'll set that once we set up the PFD, once the avionics are turned on. Flight supervisor's briefing. Our flight supervisor is basically the person that's in charge of our ramp and has oversight of the ramp to day-to-day operations. And they also give us a bit of information about operations and some of the things that are happening today. Well, we'll notice the 7 left and 25 right are closed, and the ILS 25 right's out of service. And then there's a rocket launch on the 11th. Not going to be a factor for us today. Today is the 9th. And Ormond VOR is out of service, and the rest of the NOTAMs here, the rest of the briefing doesn't actually apply to us. We're not going to any of these airports today. Departure clearance, we're being given VFR clearance at below 3,000. Departure is 125.35, we're squawking 0120. Pre-flight risk assessment score was 19. You'll do that before you come out to the airplane. It's in the green, which that means that there's no unusual hazards present for today's flight. There's always a hazard and there's always a risk that something could happen, but nothing that should be out of the ordinary today. There was a high-risk area, and any high-risk area is anything over 3 when we're doing the calculation. Any line item has over 3, which is a slow weather deterioration. So we do have to watch it for the weather as it deteriorates in the summer here in Daytona, and we'll make sure that if it does get too bad, we'll either return home a little earlier or we'll divert to an airport and just wait it out. VA today, our maneuvering speed is 99 knots. I'm the pilot in command. Typically, the student will be pilot flying and the instructor will be pilot monitoring. We use positive change of flight controls. If we change those roles, who's pilot flying, who's pilot monitoring, we'll say it visually and verbally identify who's flying the aircraft. We'll say, I have flight controls, you have flight controls, I have flight controls. So the instructor will say, you have flight controls, you will say, I have flight controls, and the instructor will say, you have flight controls, once he actually lets go of the controls. Then we'll maintain a sterile cockpit. We'll make sure that we don't talk about anything other than what's pertinent to the task at hand, to the safety of flight, and anything that applies right now. We're not going to talk about anything else that will not apply to our flight today. We're trying to keep a sterile cockpit as much as we can. And we'll keep a safe attitude. We'll look out for any hazardous attitudes and apply any antidote if we do see it. So that's the briefing. Put that back here. We'll continue with our checklist. We said the fuel selector is on both. Fuel shut-off valve is in. Make sure control is idle cutoff. We'll push the button in and pull it out. Make sure it's idle cutoff. Throttle, we'll put a 1/4 inch in. So what that means, I'll put my finger about a 1/4 inch away from the stop right here and just push it in a 1/4 inch. Standby battery test. So we'll take the standby battery, we'll push it down to the test, and we'll make sure this green light stays on for 10 seconds. If it doesn't stay on for 10 seconds, we'll follow the note in the expanded version of the checklist. Okay, and then we'll arm it. And when we arm it, we're going to wait for our PFD screen to turn on. As you see here, it's turning on right now. Okay, so there's the PFDs turned on. We're going to look at our engine indicating system and look at our electrical part, electrical section. We're going to notice the main bus. We have to make sure that, the E-bus is 24 volts. It's right here. E-bus is 24 volts. The main bus is 1.5 or less. And the standby battery annunciator should be discharging. And it's verified on the standby battery annunciator. We're just going to wait for that and make sure that comes on too. There's the standby battery annunciator telling us the standby battery is powering the system currently. We'll make sure our panel lights are off. Right now we don't need any of them since it's day flight. And navigation lights are off, and all the other lights are off except the beacon. We'll keep that one on. Our cabin power 12 volt is right here. We'll make sure that's off. That gives us power if we ever use the power outlet. Our parking brake is set, and our seat belts and harnesses are on before start checklist complete. Now we'll start with the engine start checklist. So engine start checklist, master switch is on both sides. Now we're going to prime the engine. Now priming the engine basically sends fuel into the cylinders so that they're ready to be burned as we start up the engine. Now depending on the temperature of the engine, it might be a hot start or a cold start. To do that, we'll push the engine button right here. We'll push system. And we'll look at the oil temperature. Right now it's 75. So what we're looking for is 150. Anything below 150 is a cold start. Anything above 150 is a hot start. If it's a cold start, we need to prime the engine. If it's a hot start, we take, for the most part, don't need to prime the engine. But however, if the airplane has been sitting for more than 30 minutes without it being started, then we'll need to prime the engine. So how do we prime the engine? We're going to look at our fuel flow indicator right here. We'll put our left hand on the fuel pump, auxiliary fuel pump, and our right hand on the mixture. What we're going to do is turn the fuel pump on, put the mixture full forward, and we're going to watch the fuel flow indication. The fuel flow indication will start increasing, and it will stop and stabilize. At that point, that's when we know we've primed it enough. So fuel pump on, mixture forward, fuel flow indication starts increasing and stabilizes, mixture out, fuel pump off. And that's how you prime the engine. The next thing we're going to do is take the key off here. We're going to put the key into the ignition, but we're not going to turn it on. We're just going to make sure it's in, and we'll do one click and back off just to make sure it's the right key. It has four clicks, right, left, both, and start. So the start is where we'll, if we do start the engine, it's kind of like cranking a car, where you hold it into start. When the engine starts, you let go of the key, and the key springs back to a normal position, which in this case for us will be both. So starting the engine, we're going to put one hand on the ignition, one hand on the mixture. We're going to first clear the area. We're going to look all around. We're going to look from left behind the aircraft to a sweep around the aircraft to make sure there's no fuel trucks, make sure no one's walking behind us or anyone close to the airplane. And we'll yell clear prop. Clear prop! You want to yell that loud so everyone can hear. And also wait a couple seconds to make sure that there's no one that's close to the airplane that wants us to not start the engine. Alright, so we've primed the engine, we've cleared the prop area. Next thing you do is starter engage. Now the starter engage, mixture full forward, and the throttle to 1000 RPM, you kind of have to memorize that part instantly because you won't have time to look at the checklist. Everything happens quite fast. So again, we'll put our left hand on the ignition, right hand on the mixture. We're going to already clear the prop. We're going to crank the engine. We're going to take the key ignition and put it all the way to start, and we're going to hold it into start. As the prop starts turning, you hear the engine actually catch. It's a sound that you're going to have to watch out for. When the engine catches, and just like a car, when you hear your car start, you let go of the key. The same thing with an aircraft engine. You let go of the key, and when you let go of the key, put the mixture, push this button in, put the mixture full forward, and then put your hand directly onto the throttle and take the tachometer, your engine RPM reading, to 1000 RPM. So we got, before we do that, we'll again clear, just make sure we're clear. We've got a truck coming in front of us right here. Okay, so here we go. Let's go ahead and start the engine. Now what you'll notice there, the engine did not start. Well, it could be a couple things. One, it could be not enough prime, or two, it could be not a flooded engine. Now, I don't suspect that I flooded the engine in the first prime, so it might not have enough prime. So what we'll do is just do a quick 1 to 2 second prime. Make sure the throttle is a 1/4 inch in. Now we'll wait, if we cranked it for about 10 seconds, we have to wait 20 seconds before we try another an attempt at starting the engine. So it's been about 20 seconds, so we'll try it again. Clear prop! Alright, so there the engine has started. Put the mixture full forward. And the throttle's to 1000 RPM. So we'll go back to our checklist. And here we go, engine start. So the oil pressure, we checked, oil pressure right there, it shows in the green, and it's come up within 3 seconds. And throttles to 1000 RPM amps. You look at your batteries, your main battery and your standby battery, look at the amps here, and you'll notice that it has a plus sign, so they're both charging, which is good. That's what we want to see. There's no low volts enunciator, and the mixture will lean. To lean the mixture, we're going to take the throttle. I keep my finger, just push it against the stop, so I have more control over the throttle. Move it up to 1200 RPM. And then we're going to take the mixture control and turn it counterclockwise until we get a rough running engine, which is typically, you'll see an engine RPM decrease, about 20 to 30 RPM. So we'll take it out slowly. You'll see the pace that I'm doing it at. Looking at my engine RPM, and there's the RPM decrease. So now we'll slowly turn the mixture control clockwise until we get a smooth running engine. Comes up about to the same RPM that it started off with dropping at. So there it is. We'll take the throttle back to 1000. Go back to our checklist, and that's the last part of our checklist. So engine start checklist complete. Alright, before taxi checklist. Okay, so before taxi checklist, avionics bus 1 and 2 on. At that point, we'll put on our headsets. I'll put my earbuds in, and you will put on your headset.
Alright, at this point we'll see if we can hear each other. So I'll say mic check, and you'll say loud and clear. So we'll obviously can hear each other now, and we'll continue with our checklist. So next thing, we'll check our flight instruments. So our flight instruments is over here. We have our airspeed indicator, altimeter, our VSI, which shows our rate of climb or descent, our heading indicator. So we're going to check that our airspeed indicator is 0. Our attitude indicator shows kind of a level pitch to see where we're actually at right now. It looks like we're at a level pitch, slightly nose up. Altimeter shows 100 feet low, which doesn't make any sense to us, and that's because I got the wrong altimeter setting in there. If we look back at it from when we got the weather from the ATIS, altimeter setting was 3009. So to do that, we'll take our barrow knob, the big one, and change that to that says 3009. 3019. Okay. 3019. The 3019 is what we put in there, and then we continue with our indications. Heading indicator shows a known heading. We'll match our heading indicator with our magnetic compass. So it shows about a 240 heading on the mag compass here. It shows about 255. They're generally the same. We'll watch to make sure that it matches up and syncs up closer when we actually start taxiing around. It may just be a little bit stuck right now, but my heading indicator does show a known heading, kind of focusing towards runway 25 right now, which we're paralleling, so it makes sense. We'll go to our standbys and make sure our standbys are 0 on the airspeed indicator. Our standby attitude indicator will move this so it matches up with our primary attitude indicator. And again, our standby altimeter matches up with the standby, the primary altimeter. We'll come over to MFD. We'll verify that our navigation database expiration date is ahead of us. Today is the 9th of August, so it's 16th of August. And we'll push this button in. Start the MFD. Make sure that starts up, and from that point on, we'll continue with our checklist. It says reset gallons remaining, reset the fuel. So we'll push engine, system, and we've got these 2 buttons, reset fuel. So what that is that our fuel calculations, we have gallons used, and we can check our gallons remaining. That's from the previous flight. So we want to reset the fuel. That'll turn everything to 0. And gallons remaining, we have tabs today, and tabs is 35 gallons. What you'll notice here is already an instant 35 gallons. So we can push that, and you'll see the gallons remaining being 35 gallons. If we have to change that up or down, we can use the minus or plus gallons here, and also there's also minus 10 plus 10 gallons, so we can adjust it as we need to. As you can see here, the fuel indication is not showing exactly 35 gallons, but this was conservative. We'll put 35 gallons. That's what it showed. The actual inspection of the fuel tank showed that they were near the tab. Okay, continuing on our checklist, avionics set, so the MSR radios. What we have to do is up here, we'll use the COM knob. We'll set Eagle Ops on our in-flight guide. flight guide shows that Eagle offsets our ramp frequency. It's 123.3. Switch it out, and then we'll set the next frequency we're going to use, which is ground control. Again, our in-flight guide shows 121.9. Set our tower frequency up next, because after we taxi the runway, we have to talk to Daytona Beach Tower. And then departure frequency, which is the frequency we got when we got our departure clearance. And we'll notice from the departure clearance that we got was 125.35. Right, so there's our frequencies and avionics set up. Also turn our altitude bug to 3000. That's the altitude we're going to go up to today. That altitude bug will be dependent on what clearance we've been given, or if we're restricted by any altitude, let's say like overlying airspace. We'll have to watch out for. Alright, continuing on with the checklist. Autopilot electric trim. This aircraft does not have autopilot. How you know if there was a control panel right here. If we had to do that, we'll have to check that the autopilot is, we can engage and disengage it if it was operational. Flaps up, so we'll put our hands on the flaps. I will say flaps identified. Once the pilot monitoring verifies that I have the flap, they'll say flaps verified, and I'll pull the flaps up to the up position, and we'll make sure the flaps are actually moving up. Pilot flying will then say flaps up, and the pilot monitoring should respond with flaps up verified. Alright, and parking brake is released. And that is the end of that's before taxi checklist complete. So put this away. The next thing to do now is to taxi out to our exit point on the ramp.